Okay, today we are starting our new unit, and you're going to see me taking notes a little differently this unit. Instead of note packets, I've moved to just taking notes by hand. So we are in section 3.1, and today we are going to be talking about functions. So a couple of things with functions that yesterday you would have done all of that research and looked up some different terms, and then we are going to be covering those terms again today. So first term that we are going to chat about is set notation. And we have to talk about set notation because we are going to be placing some things in set notation. So set notation is first thing you write your numbers from smallest to largest. And the main thing with set notation, or the big thing, is that you have to have these curly brackets. So they kind of look like this. And then you put your numbers from smallest to largest, and then you end it with a curly bracket. So main thing, please make sure that you, if you were to write them out, which you guys really won't be, but they need to be in curly brackets. Next thing that we have to chat about are coordinates. So just to keep in mind that when you have an XY coordinate, X comes first, Y comes second. That's something that you kind of should know, but I've done this long enough to know that I got to remind you. And then the main part of this section today is going to be about domain and range. So when we are figuring out what the domain is or what the range is, it has to do with your coordinates. So the domain is going to be the set. So I'm saying set because that means that you have to write it like this up here. It's the set of x values, which again would be the first value in your coordinate. And the range is going to be the set. Again, set means you have to write it from smallest to largest of y values. So you're going to write your domain with your x values, write your range with your y values, put them in those curly brackets, call it a day. Main thing to remember, biggest thing for the domain and the range that you need to make sure that you keep in mind is that you only write each number once. So what that means is that if you were to give an example and maybe it has two x values, it has like 2, 1 and then 2, 2, you only write that 2 once. So I've got an example to show you and hopefully it'll make sense, but I definitely want to kind of show what I mean by that. So for example, if I give you coordinates 2, 3, 4, 6, 1, 5, 2, 5, and 0, 5. And I want to identify the domain, identify the range. What I would do first, the domain is going to be the set of x values. And remember, we're writing it in set notation. So I'm going to write my little curly brackets. And then when I write in set notation, I write it smallest to largest. So my x values are going to be the first values here, and the smallest first value is going to be 0. Then 1, then 2, and notice that 2 occurs twice, but I only write each number once. So I only write one of the 2's, and then I have 4. And that's all of my x values. My range is going to be the set of the y values. So that's going to be the 3, the 6, the 5, the 5, the 5. So the smallest of those is 3. Then I have a 5. It shows up 3 times, but you only write it once. And then 6. So that's how you write your domain and your range. That's it. Don't make it any harder than it is. Second thing you're going to be doing today is taking a look at your domain and range and taking a look at coordinates and these things called mapping diagrams and figuring out if it's a function. So the main part of this whole entire unit is it's a function unit. So in order for it to be a function, or what it means to be a function, is that the x values do not repeat. So another way to think of that is if your x values do repeat, it is not a function. So if we take a look back at our example up here, and here for our x values, we had a 2, a 4, a 1, a 2, and a 0. So 2 repeated. So that means that this is not a function. So we can add to our problems now. We're going to be identifying the domain, identify the range, and identifying whether it's a function or not. So let's take a look at one more example on that. So if we had 3, 6, 5, 7, 7, 7, and 8, 9, the domain would again be the set, so those curly brackets of the x values. So 3, 5, 7, and 8. And actually, how convenient, they're all in order. And then the range would be the set of y values. So we have a 6, 7, 7, 9. So 6, 7, only write the 7 once, 9. And now I need to determine if it's a function or not. So do I have any x values that repeated? I have a 3, a 5, a 7, and an 8. None of them repeat, so yes, this is a function. Sadly, we don't care if the range repeats. We only care about the domain. All right, last couple of things that we need to chat about. Today is going to seem a little bit lengthier than normal days because we do have some vocab to cover. Next thing you're going to see are these things called mapping diagrams. So what a mapping diagram does is it kind of creates coordinates for you, or it organizes coordinates for you. So we have a mapping diagram, with we'll say a 1, 2, 3. And then here's this with a -1, 0, and 5. And then with mapping diagrams, you're always going to see arrows. So if I have an arrow from 1 to 5, from 2 to -1, and from 3 to 0, what that means, or what's happening here, is I'm creating coordinates. So here, if I have a 1 and it has an arrow pointing to a 5, that means that I have a coordinate of 1, 5. If I have a 2 with an arrow pointing to -1, that means I have a coordinate of 2, -1. And same thing here. If I have a 3 with an arrow pointing to 0, that means I have a coordinate of 3, 0. From there, now that I have my coordinates, I can create my domain and my range. Domain is going to be, we have 1, 2, 3. And then the range is going to be -1, 0, 5. And because my domain did not repeat, this is a function. So an example, I just want to show one more for you guys. If I showed you this mapping diagram, if I have 1, 5, 7, -5, -2, 6, and 10. And then we've got arrows from 1 to -2, from 1 to 6, from 5 to 6, and from 7 to 10. What this gives us are the coordinates 1, -2, 1, 6, 5, 6, and 7, 10. Notice that -5 in our mapping diagram didn't get used. So you can't really just say this is the domain, this is the range, because this guy didn't have an arrow towards it. So the domain is going to be 1, 5, 7. And the range is going to be -2, 6, and 10. And then you have to determine if it's a function or not. And this one is not a function because the number 1 happens twice, so not a function. If any of that was confusing, please make sure that you rewind and take a look at it. The last thing for today is going to be the vertical line test. So the vertical line test is something that I feel like when I go to teach it every year, everyone's like, oh, I think I kind of remember seeing that. The vertical line test. So first thing, vertical lines go up and down. In my many years of this, I've learned that some don't know which way they go. It goes up and down. So what a vertical line does, what the vertical line test does, it is used to determine if a graph or scatter plot, because you could just have points drawn, is a function. So if you're taking a look at points on a graph, or if you're taking a look at actual line graph or parabolas or whatever, you're going to use the vertical line test. So what the vertical line test says, if a vertical line passes through two or more points on the coordinate plane, or on the graph, we'll say on the graph, it is not a function. So same thing, if your x's repeat, it's not a function. If your line passes through two or more spots, it's not a function. So you just got to keep an eye on that. So here's an example for you. Here's my coordinate plane. And let's say that I have this parabola. So this is a parabola. If you were to take Algebra 2, you'd learn about them in a couple of years. So we're going to take a look at vertical lines. So vertical lines go straight up and down. And if I ever pass through two or more spots on my graph, then it's not a function. So I draw vertical lines. I'm always passing through just one spot on my blue graph. And I never pass through more than once. I pass through the arrow there, but that doesn't count. So this would be a function because I only pass through one spot. So another example for you would be if I gave you this. It's like kind of like a C or backwards C. So if I go to draw the vertical lines here, I cross through here and here. And the minute it crosses through at one point or at 2 points, you can stop. So this would not be a function, not a function. Whoop. So if any of that was confusing, please make sure that you pause or rewind, take a look at it. And tomorrow we will be moving on to some more stuff. Have a great day, guys.